Okay, I'm going to demonstrate how to paint trees with 3 different kinds of brushes. Here's a liner brush. This is a size 0, and it's very skinny. Here's a fan brush, and it's a little one. So I'm going to paint it on this small tile, so that's why. I already painted the sky color on here, so I don't waste a lot of your time. And here's a sponge that I'm going to use to dab on the leaves and stuff. So I might as well get started. So first of all, I'm going to use raw umber. It's a nice dark medium brown, so I'll use that to make the tree trunks. I can get the cap back on. And what I'm going to do is use a little bit of water, just a little tiny bit of water in the, I just dipped it in there. Just a little tiny bit. So now I'm going to just make a tree branch like this. If you keep your brushes nice and clean, you won't have a problem with making nice little lines. And if you just use a little bit of water, because if you use too much water, it's going to be transparent, and you don't want the tree to be transparent. Make it a little thicker on the trunk. And that thin out there where the twigs are. I'll put some down here too, so that I can put some leaves on the branches down below more. So that's a tree. Here's another one. It takes a little practice to make trees like this, but that's the whole idea, is it just takes practice. It would probably help to, if you take a picture of a tree outside or something like that, it would probably help to paint that one. There, let's start with that one, I guess. Now I'm going to use some of my favorite green, Sap Green, and I'll put it next to the raw umber. Don't have to put much down. I'd probably put about 10 times more Sap Green there than I have to put down, so that's a bad habit. So first of all, I'm going to use this hand brush and maybe dip it in a little bit of raw umber, but mostly Sap Green. And I don't want to glob it all up or anything like that. I want to make it just like that. And I'm just going to, for now, make the corner, use the corner of the fan brush to make some bunches, tree bunches like that. Because if I use the whole thing, I could get it out of control like that, see? That's putting down a little bit too much. I always like to do a little bit at a time, because it's better to add to a painting than subtract to it, because subtracting from a painting is more difficult. So all I'm doing is using the corner of the fan brush, a little bit more than the corner, and just dabbing it on there. And you always want to make sure that you leave a little bit of space between the tree bunches so that there's tree holes there, because it's kind of hard to make the sky come back after you already blocked it out, because then you have to get the same color blue and you have to dive it in there and try to make it look natural and everything else. The best thing to do is just do it right in the first place. See, so this is one way to make trees. Is just with the corner of a fan brush, or if you're going to make pine trees or something like that, then you might want to use the whole thing or almost the whole thing. So let's say you're making a pine tree and you want to make it, and pine trees usually go pretty straight up. You don't see too many pine trees that are crooked unless they're falling down or something. Well, let's say these are a few here. It's going to take some practice making straight lines like that, unless you already know how to do it. But the best way to do it is not so much how I just did it there, but one way is to hold the brush almost vertical and let the bristles bend like that, and that'll make a nice straight line. But anyway, like if you're making ship masts or something like that, you can use a straight edge and go like this, or if your eye is really good, you can go straight down with a line freehand. So let's try using a sponge. This is I only use natural sea sponges. I don't use any fake sponges, because natural ones are, since they're not machine made, they're more natural. See, that's, oh, I was going to paint a pine tree there, but anyway, that's how to use a sea sponge for a regular tree. I'll put some over here too. So that works pretty well, except what you got to do is make sure you clean that out right away with water, or else you're going to clog up all that nice sponge texture. And you don't want to do that, because you want to use it over and over again. So what I do is I really make sure, I'll even run it under the faucet to make sure that it's really clean. It's pretty clean there. Okay, that's acceptable. Okay, so I'm going to use this fan brush, and I'm going to do the same thing making the pine trees. I'm just going back and forth like this. Kind of like in a zigzag way. And some pine trees are shaped a little different than others. And they usually don't have the leaves going all the way to the ground. Well, just like most trees. Most trees don't either. You might want to fill in the middle section thicker. Pretty much blocking out the trunk. See, and you can go out, and as you go out, you make it thinner, because that's how the needles go. They go out, they get thinner as they go out. So you can just dry brush the ends of the branches out. If you wanted to make it thinner, you can always, if you want more sky showing through, you can always do this. If you're painting bigger, you can, this is a small brush, but if you're painting bigger trees, you can always use the whole brush when you're doing pine trees. Like that. And as you get more to the top, it narrows off so you can start using the corner more. But, so that's a good way to make pine trees. This is the way I usually make trees, even though it's the harder way and the more tedious way. I make the bunches like this with the tip of a round brush. A round brush comes to a pretty sharp point. And I go like this, and because this way I have more control. But not everybody wants to do it this way because you have to have a little more patience. All I'm doing is tapping a whole bunch of little tiny leaves on there. The reason I do it this way usually is because it's the way to have the most control. But it does take longer. So what I'm going to do is I'll make the tree trunk and some branches. Coming off of there, and the ground. And let's say I'll have the sunlight coming in this direction. So I'll make the cast shadow of the tree. Okay, this is another thing I do a lot of. I don't want the cast shadow to be super detailed. It just depends on what the grass is like that it's falling on. So what I'll do is put it on there like that and rub it a little bit with my finger so that it looks more like a shadow rather than another tree. Anyway, and then when I want to lighten up the tree in some parts and make them bunches, as the tree comes out, it's going to have some lighter areas that are going to reach more out to the sun. So I could use this little brush. So now I'm going to use green gold. And you don't have to do that. You can like mix white with the sap green, or you can mix yellow with it. A good thing to do is experiment and just see what works the best for you, what colors you use. But in this case, I like to use green gold. I'll put a little white on there to lighten that up a little bit more, to make it more demonstrative. Okay. This is titanium white. I'm going to mix that a little bit with the green gold to make it lighter. The lighter parts of the tree are going to look like they're coming toward you more. So you want to make those in bunches too. You don't really want to clog anything up. See, if you want to make, the sunlight is coming toward here from the top left, and so I'm going to make the top of the trees lighter, catching the sunlight. And then over here, I can just keep it as it is because I don't want to make it look like the sunlight is getting all over the tree. It can do that for the most part if it's like high noon. But in this case, it isn't. So anyway, that's a way to lighten that up. And if you want it to be less yellow, you can always take just sap green and white and forget the green gold. And let's say this one. See, that's lightening up the leaves, but it's making it a little more of a natural color. Hey, anyway, that's a way to make it to where it's more, to make a tree look bunchy like it is. It has bunches of leaves. You don't necessarily have to make every leaf. You know, it's just a matter of making it look more natural. And a pine tree isn't that bright. It doesn't, I don't know why, but they don't seem to catch that much light. But they don't seem to turn very yellow or anything. They just seem to be just dark green. So I'm lighting them up a little bit to catch the sun, but not a whole lot. Maybe even that's too light. Anyway, if you wanted to make like with this, some pine trees do go to the bottom. All the pine needles go to the bottom. But let's say it does in this case. In this one here. And then the grass would be down here. And then to put like a bush in front of that, you could use a different green because different things are different colors. Different plants are different colors, different greens. But I'm only showing this here. This is just sap green and white, but just to show you, if you put some bushes here in front, you know, you can do that to make it look more 3D. Anyway, that's a few samples of how to make trees. Or you can make trees without any leaves whatsoever. I do that a lot. Where sometimes I'll put trees with branches and leaves and everything else, and then I'll make some of the trees with no leaves at all. Because that's how nature is sometimes. It's just, you see some trees that are full of leaves and then other trees right next to it that don't even have any leaves at all. That's how I really like to make them, is make each individual leaf on there. And then turn them into clumps. But whatever way you want to do it, you know, all these ways work. So I think that like this tree here, it would have to be darker over here where the sunlight isn't shining, because like I said, the light is coming from this way. You just have to model it. It's like you're drawing it with paint. There's one saying that always stuck to me. It's you paint as you draw. So, or you draw as you paint. Because you're actually drawing the picture as you're painting it. Unless you design the whole thing out and make it perfectly situated to where you know where everything is going to go. And how it's going to be there, that's a different story. I don't paint that way. I pretty much have an idea of what I want the painting to look like and the composition, but then I'll make it up as I go along. As far as where the bunches of the trees are going to go, I just, start somewhere and just take it to where I want to go. But anyway, so that's a demonstration on how some trees are painted. There will be more later. So, thank you for watching.